So do you ever foresee Power Query being used as an enterprise ETL tool in lieu of, let's say, something like SSIS?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
And I don't think that's what it's intended for. And you know, it's aimed for more of those kind of self-service scenarios. And I don't think there's any need to be kind of, you know, negative about that or think that it's kind of an object of shame. It's a different tool for a different style of job. And a lot of people do just want to be able to take data and move it from one place to the other in a kind of ad hoc manner, or just to do it in a kind of quick and easy way. You know, Power Query doesn't offer you, you know, logging, repeatability, all of the things you would expect from an enterprise ETL tool. And I don't want Power Query to get those things. I want it to be just a kind of nice, quick, easy to use interface for moving data and getting it into shape for whatever purposes you need it for.
Okay, but yet it is capable of dealing with large volumes of data and creating very durable processes. So it's more than just a simple desktop tool for, you know, the average Excel advanced user.
And one of the things that people don't realize about Power Query, which is another really cool thing about it, is that in a way you can think about Power Query as being a kind of universal query generator. So a lot of people, especially on my pre-con yesterday, had assumed that, well, you know, when you connect to a really big data source, Power Query has to load absolutely everything in, and then it does all the processing in its own engine. That does happen sometimes, but actually, where possible, Power Query will look at the list of steps, the transformations that you've got, and try and push that work back to the data source. So this is something called query folding. So let's imagine you've got a billion row fact table, and you only want a couple of rows from that.
I don't have to imagine that I have a billion row fact table. I have a billion row fact table.
Well, but yeah, so let's imagine that you want to just pick out a couple of different invoice numbers from that billion row fact table. Now, you don't want Power Query to suck in all of those billion rows and then do the filtering itself, because obviously that's going to be horribly slow. It'll probably crash your desktop PC. So what actually happens is, assuming your billion row fact table is stored in a relational database like SQL Server, you know, in Power Query in the UI, you create a series of steps. One of those steps would be to filter by, you know, invoice number ABC123. In the background, Power Query says, well, I know how to translate that back to SQL. We're connecting to a SQL Server database. It takes that list of steps and it translates that back to a SQL query. And it runs that SQL query to get just those rows you want, brings it down to the desktop. So it kind of pushes the work back to the relational database. Now, there are a couple of other data sources where it's able to do this. Generally speaking, if you've got something like a database or something like a query language that Power Query can generate, that's when query folding starts to take place. And that to me is the other really, really cool thing about it. It's not just a nice UI or a nice paradigm, it's a kind of universe, it can be a universal query generator. You point at a relational database, it'll generate SQL. You point at analysis services, it'll generate MDX. You point at an OData feed, it will generate URLs that apply those filters that you want to be able to get the data from the OData data source. And I can see in the future it's just going to start to support more and more query languages and databases in this way.
And we seem to be experiencing a great commitment from the product team to continue to support this product.
Yes, I mean, it's nice to see that it's getting kind of continued love from Microsoft. And you know, I think it's partly because the people that found it and discovered it loved it, gave that feedback back to Microsoft, and you know, Microsoft said, hey, well, this is good, let's put it in lots of other products, because there's such a need for this kind of quick and easy, you know, self-service data moving, cleansing, filtering, what have you.
Now, another place that we're seeing Power Query show up is in the analysis services tabular projects in 2017. So, and that's an enterprise tool. And so I can build large-scale enterprise, you know, server-based solutions with analysis services tabular that might feed data that's consumed by Power BI or reporting services or Excel. So, as an enterprise tool running on a server, what's the future of Power Query in that regard?
It's very interesting. I mean, I think, if I'm honest, the main reason that Microsoft put Power Query in analysis services was simply so that analysis services would be kind of, you'd be able to take a Power BI model and upgrade it to analysis services. So there would be a seamless transition. You know, before Power BI has always used the analysis services engine, but Power BI has used the Power Query engine for data moving. So that the fact that you couldn't do that in analysis services meant that analysis services in the past didn't have the Power Query engine. It was that big blocker to stop you being able to move from a Power BI solution up to a kind of more corporate.
All right, so we should have a more consistent experience between Power
I think
Power
that's
Query,
the
Power BI.
number one reason why this was done, and I think that was a very good reason. It does give you some other extra things which I think is going to be really cool. So the demo that I always do with this is to show how it changes, for example, how you do partitioning in analysis services. So traditionally with analysis services, you have a big table, you want to partition it, you then end up having to write a SQL query with a different where clause for each partition. And then of course the problem comes in, you've got a new column on a fact table. You then have to go away and update all of those SQL queries, and that's quite a job for maintenance. Whereas as soon as you start to use M queries as the data source for a partition, it suddenly means that taking advantage of the M language, you can write, for example, you can wrap the main part of the logic, the kind of list of columns that you want to bring in an M function, and then you just call that function with a very small amount of code in each partition, passing in, for example, the date range, the year maybe that you want to use for each partition. And then when you need to do any maintenance, you just go to that M function, change it once, and all of the partitions are automatically updated. And of course, the other thing that this gives you with analysis services is access to way more data sources than you'd have ever had before.
Certainly, because that investment has already been made.
Exactly, and they make it once for Power BI. You get it for free with analysis services, and a lot of these enterprise, these cloud-based data sources, things like Cosmos DB, Azure Data Lake Store, these are going to be things which are very important enterprise data sources that analysis services needs to connect to, or will even more need to connect to in the future.